Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. This is a recent reads video. Since this channel's conversion to BookTube, as it were, a channel wherein I report on my reading, part of an attempt to become a better reader project, I have made periodic videos under the title Recent Reads Video, wherein I recount the last, say, 3, sometimes 4 books which I have completed. And so this is one of those videos. There is a playlist, and I will put a link into the description box if you care to see the others. I think I've been booktubing for maybe 3 years now, and so every single book that I have covered during that duration has made its appearance, some more or less. I don't review the books. Maybe I talk about them a little bit, maybe spout off, maybe go off on a tangent and the like. I have been in the midst of a early China project as well. I'm trying to read a lot of books from early China. The last recent reads video, if you saw the last one, will have ended with this book, the Guoyu, or the, the Discourses of the Nations, or something like that. Discourses of the States. And here you see the next 3, starting with the Zuo tradition, or Zuozhuan or something. My Chinese pronunciation is horrendously awful. I always get confused by transliterations, and I try to pronounce words as they are written, or as the words written would likely be pronounced in English, which in either transliteration system is or can be drastically wrong. So this was the start. Then I followed it up with the Spring and Autumn Annals of Buwei, this translated by Knoblock and Riegel. And then the one that I most recently finished was the Huainanzi. Now both the, and of course it wouldn't be Z, but that's how you would say it in English. The Huainanzi and the Zuo tradition are big undertakings done by like boards of scholars, if you will. So each of these 2 volumes has multiple translators, and I can tell you who they are. Well, I guess I can put this here for now. Sadly, it has taken me more than a month to read 3 books, but it must be said that these 3 are pretty heavy hitters. So it comes in 3 volumes. This is published by the University of Washington Press, and the formatting of these books is quite nice. I would say at this point that University of Washington Press is state of the art. So you will get a spread like this, Chinese on one page, English on the other, footnotes sometimes on one or the other, or crossing. Here's another good example. It makes for a very readable text and a very enjoyable reading experience. So the Zuo tradition is a commentary upon an older work, the Spring and Autumn Annals. Now, the Spring and Autumn Annals were a little calendar that was supposedly put together by Confucius. Now, he would not have done it himself, but he was accredited with having edited it, and it's a very short work with for each year spring and autumn is just a shorthand for saying the year. So it gives you accounts of what happened every year, the major significant events every year for a period of more than 100 years. Does it say what the time period is here? No, it doesn't. Well, whatever. The first one is the editors also give you all of the information that you need. So it was done by reigns, so focused on the rulers of the state of Lu, which is also the state where Confucius made his biggest imprint. And later on in the book, he makes an appearance. So we start at 722 BC. And then the final book, let's see. Well, let's see. We have Lord I, and I won't. So the last entry is 468 BCE, and I think there might have been a gap, a minor gap between the absolute last entry, but otherwise it is pretty complete. It covers all of the years, and so what the original spring and autumn annals covered was, as I say, just the most important events of the year, the most salient. Of course, sometimes very important things were omitted as well for any number of various reasons. But then subsequently, in more than one iteration, scholars came upon the heels of that original work and wrote commentaries. If you've read anything at all of ancient Chinese literature, you're going most likely to have come across a book where there are multiple layers of text and an older core perhaps, and then all of this other stuff that has grown up around it. So the Spring and Autumn Annals is one such. There are at least 3 extant commentaries upon the book. The first 2, I think, take it in regards as a moralistic work, so trying to preach at you. I have not seen either of those, but the one that I have read, the Zuo tradition, I believe the most extensive one, treats it as history. And if you are inclined to learn about the history of early China, it is probably an indispensable work. I came off of the heels of this, and this also would be very good. This is not available in English in a complete edition. This is an abridged version. So I think this one volume contains about a third of the text. So I have heard that would be an ideal starting point. It covers basically the same period of time as this, the spring and autumn period of China, a historical designation which arises because of this book, or because of the Spring and Autumn Annals, not because of the commentaries necessarily. So if you study about the Zhou dynasty, you will see it's subdivided. You have the Western, and then you have the Eastern dynasty, or dynasty, if you rather, and that is subdivided into the spring and autumn period, and followed by the warring states period. Well, the spring and autumn period has only been segregated out because of this work, but it becomes very convenient. Now, I have not read much into the history of the warring states per se, but when I finished this, I said, oh, there's got to be something written which covers the warring states as well, something contemporaneous or recently thereafter. I mean, a work of antiquity, and I researched a little bit and found out that there is one, so I am going to read that later on in this project. So between this book and this book, you do encounter an awful lot of the pivotal characters in Chinese history. And actually, throughout all of these compendiums that I've been reading, because most of these works are compendiums of one sort or another, you read a lot of different anecdotes, and there's an awful lot of duplication overall, but you do become more familiar with certain important figures. So Lord Huan and Guanzi. I did a video. I read the Guanzi, which is a text, it was attributed to the statesman, but of course a lot of these attributions, even as I say, the one to Confucius, have been largely disproven. It was a fanciful creation of scholars of the day, and probably very useful in terms of ordering and preserving the material. But he is a very, very important early figure. I think he was in the state of Qi. I don't know. I don't retain a lot, and with all of these Chinese books, I have learned that they become more important in context with all of the other books. So early on, I read the Annals of Confucius, and I think after having read all of these, if I ever reread it, it will mean a lot more to me because I will have a greater familiarity with all of the many characters. As I say in this book, Confucius himself plays a role towards the end. But one thing you realize with this ancient Chinese literature is that Confucius is all over the place. You will not find a book that doesn't have some sort of reference to Confucius, some sort of anecdote, and so forth. So that was the first book. It took me a solid month to read, but the book is very nicely done as far as the maps that you might need, the scholarly apparatus is both helpful and useful. There's a very long introduction, which I am beginning to believe is a hallmark of this publisher, a very long introduction that really was talked about the text, talked about the transmission of the text, talked about the context, the times, and just really provided you with about everything basic that you needed to tackle such a work. It's the kind of book that one could easily devote one's entire life to, and at the end of it, not consider it a waste of time in any kind of way. So the next book that I read was the Spring and Autumn Annals of Liu Buwei, and he is a very interesting character. This is, as I said, translated by John Knoblock and somebody Riegel. I'm not really sure. Let's double check that. Jeffrey Riegel, if that's how you say the name. He, therefore, wrote his Prolegomena, and being full of the caprice, inscribed commingled souvenirs and prophecies, he made a singular collation. So they did a nice little, what is that, an epithet at the beginning? I never remember these words. That obviously it does not come from the original Annals. And this book also has a lovely introduction, which teaches you about who Mr. Liu Buwei was. And he's an important character to know. I'm surprised there haven't been 100 movies made about him. He was, as I said somewhere else, the inception of the Qing dynasty, the first dynasty of China, would not have happened but for him. So I recommend the introduction to this book if you don't read the whole thing, if your library has it. It, like many other Chinese works, is a compendium of lots of different stories. It begins with 12 chapters devoted to the calendar and all of the calendrical associations or affiliations, all of the things that were supposed to be done at certain seasons, and how all of the different months relate to the different elements or phases, as people would say, and it's all very confusing. Astronomical occurrences and what they mean. Sorry, I'm a little distracted now. And I was not smitten with those first 12 chapters, to be sure. And then it gets into more anecdotes, stories from which there would be a lesson to be learned. And I found that there was an awful lot of wisdom in the book. So we're talking, as I said, at the very, just on the cusp of the Qin dynasty. He died before the Qin dynasty unified all of China, but he tutored the first emperor of China. And as I said, the way he arranged it, the unification of China was largely the product of one man's genius, you could say. Now, it may well be that the trends were pushing that way anyhow. I would believe that. But as it transpired, it was because of his efforts. So I recommend the book. In parts where the stories had already been known by me, I was a little bit annoyed in parts because I wanted something new. At times I was annoyed with the translation. So, for example, they would say something like, say a man who is 7 Chinese feet tall, something like that. Well, now that I'm reading a lot more and seeing the way other translators handle things, I would have preferred just to say 7 feet tall, put a little asterisk and a footnote which says the Chinese foot, the foot in ancient China was actually such and such, so 7 Chinese foot would be about the equivalent of 5 feet 3 inches in our foot measurement here. I don't like the idea of introducing that element into the text because, of course, the original text would not have said 7 Chinese feet. So it strikes me a little bit as tampering, but it is a very readable translation. Whoops. I will show you how it's laid out. So it does not waste the space that the University of Washington Press does, so it's a cheaper volume, but aside from the introduction, which I thought was great, the scholarly apparatus is deficient. It leaves a lot to be desired. A lot of things were not footnoted that should have been. There are footnotes in the back that you don't know because there's no indicator, no star or asterisk or number or anything to let you know. But it's a very important work pertaining to the rise of the Qin dynasty. It was called sort of a primer for a ruler. It attempted to collate all the known information about the universe so that it would be a good handbook to somebody, to the ruler. And that is also how the Huainanzi is described. Now, this is from later during the Han Dynasty, and it was explicitly written for that purpose. There may have been ulterior motives. The translators go into that in the introductory material. I should say, who translated this one? You have Stephen Durrant, Wai-yee Lee, and David Schaberg. So I don't know if you can see that. And this was done in a slightly different way. The translators split up and translated different parts, some I think together, but many individually. And then they all got together and I think sort of revised everything together to make everything real consistent. And this, unfortunately, or alas, does not carry the Chinese text. So you've got John S. Major, Sarah A. Queen, Andrew Seth Meyer, and Harold D. Roth, with additional contributions by Michael Puett and Judson Murray. So those were all of the translating hands of this volume. And then, as you can see how it is laid out, there is no Chinese. And there was many an occasion where I wished that the Chinese text had been opposite. Now, obviously, you would be talking quite a hefty volume if it were. The annotations are done as footnotes, and they are all quite good. Whereas the Liu Buwei, every chapter had its own little introduction, and I didn't think, was it chapter or sections, one or the other, and I didn't think that those were particularly good. They were just reiterating what you were going to read in the chapter and did very little of explaining just oddities that you might come across. This book, interestingly, oftentimes eclipses, solar eclipses particularly, would be noted, and it is correlated with astronomical data. Sometimes the date was wrong. I think there was a case where there was one which the eclipse occurred but would not have been visible where they were. And I don't know if these mysteries get solved. But this book, the Huainanzi, as I say, that's how I will say it for the sake of this video, it follows along the lines of Liu Buwei, but comes at a later time. The empire has consolidated. There is, at this point, a large literary corpus. There is a sophisticated populace. And so the tone of the book, even though it follows along the same lines and does a fair amount of duplication, it is much more sophisticated in its presentation. As I say, I wish that I would have had the Chinese, because there are points where I would have liked to be able to just resolve a question at the moment. But the introduction is good. The section introductions are okay, a little bit repetitive sometimes, but still, I found them worth reading. And then there is supplemental information at the back, which I have not gone through all of as yet. I just finished this, but Appendix A I have looked at, and I have looked at in terms of the entries that I was particularly interested in. It's a glossary, so key Chinese terms and their translations, because anytime a translation goes from Chinese to English, there are a lot of choices that have to be made. Those choices have to be or ought to be justified, at least some reason given, because of course exact equivalents are very hard to come by. The structure of the languages are so drastically different as well. But that looked very well. If you were to read, have I shown you the cover? Really lovely cover on the jacket. There is an abridged version of this with the same cover basically, but a different color. But I would highly recommend the complete if you can do it. It's got 21 chapters, and they, much more so than this or any of the other compendiums that I have read, it really strives to make a cohesive whole. So it is trying to be a unitary experience and largely does succeed. The translators suggested the 21st chapter was a recap of everything, and they suggested that it was what was used because of the format in which it was written. For one thing, it was used as the introduction of the full 20-chapter text to the court. And so they said, you could read this first if you like. And that is how I did, and I appreciated having read it first. It gave me a sense of the book, but by the time I got to the end, the book was so cohesive, I felt I would rather have done it as it is presented. Read chapters 1 through 20 and then read chapter 21 for a sort of just a rehash, refresher, tying up of everything at the end. So that is how I would recommend. I decided not to reread that at this time. Now I know there was at least a place here or there where I wanted to say something and I got confused and went off. But I will leave the description of these books there as it stands. Now I have started, I do these recent reads videos in conglomerations of 3, as much as I can. And so that does influence my reading choices, I think, well, I can put these three together for my next Recent Reads video. And I decided to group three other books published by the University of Washington Press. Now, they all go by pretty much the same format as this set, really beautifully laid out. And they are books. I do not come to the field of early China as somebody knowledgeable or as any kind of a person with a scholarly background. The most scholarly introduction I have had to the period has been books written by Mark Edward Lewis, and you can find me talking about those in these Recent Reads videos as well. It's part of my early China project. So, not knowing what they were, but knowing that this publisher was very good, I decided to just take a gamble and get these three. And so the one that I am reading now is the great commentary on the Documents classic. You probably don't need to see that, but I have started, and it has something like a 90-page introduction as well. The Document classic is this book in Penguin, so I read that earlier in my project, and so now I will see what the commentators have to say. If you are interested in studying early China, this is an indispensable starting point. Penguin gives you Confucius as the author, even though Penguin knows very well or knew very well that Confucius was not the author. But Penguin is a business, and they don't mind trying to pull the wool over the unsuspecting consumer's eyes, if you will. But so this is translated by Palmer, I think. Yeah, Martin Palmer, and it is fine. I would be happy to see it in a University Press edition of some sort, but this you don't need it at all by any means. This gives you a lot of the key history or the mythology which was common to anybody living in the early periods. When they looked to the past, they were looking to the stories that were relayed in here. Now, it is all of these texts, well, I can't say all of them, but an awful lot of the texts in this project were floating around in different iterations. And so the odd thing with this is you have this book, which has come down to us in, I think, 28 parts, 58 chapters or something like that. And the commentary was done on a text that does not correspond with this exactly. There were different versions going around. And so the editors have tried to come to an understanding of what the text that they were using looked like. And there's, of course, an endless field for scholarly inquiry and disputation. So if you were a China hand, you could, I am sure, also spend a lifetime devoted to unknotting some of these questions as well. And then the next book that I will be reading is this Garden of Eloquence, and only just in the Huainanzi, there were a couple of chapters which gave teaching anecdotes or little moral anecdotes. They were compilations, and it was most often compared to this Garden of Eloquence. And it's a format of literary presentation that was so common. And so this book has really no reason for being other than there were so many of these stories floating around. Now, there again, I will encounter some duplicates, I am sure. When I was reading the Huainanzi and I came across a duplication, I did not mind ever. Sometimes the interpretation on a story would be slightly different. But as you become familiar with these anecdotes, I mean, I've probably come across some of them like 5 times now in different books. Sometimes you only need the first couple of sentences and you already know the whole story. But it's, especially to someone like me who does not retain anything, it helps make me feel that I'm living in the times a little bit. So when you come across one of these stories, it's not completely alien, which the very first time you come across one of them, it will strike you as, what was the word, desperately foreign from that Finley essay. But oddly enough, this book is super huge, so it will probably be a long time. Let's see how long. I don't think the introduction is very long in this one. Let me see. Introduction, well, yeah. The introduction is shorter, so the introduction is about 30 pages, but then the book itself, my. Whoops, let's see. $1,241 pages. You can see that, which is kind of odd because this book at the end, which is not forming part of this project, is something like 700 pages. So I don't know how that contrast came about. And then the third book that I will read, if I live so long and all of my faculties hold out, will be Exemplary Figures. I know nothing about it. And the author, let's see, Yang Xiong, is said to have written 3 important works, which are extant, I believe, but a lot of this stuff has not been translated into English, and so I will be reading this. This is a shorter work, less than 300 pages, but 250, 240 pages, and the introduction again is about 30 pages. Yeah, so they will be less, but this one is going to be the big work. And since I've shown you my other books from University of Washington Press, I also ordered this. This was actually the one that I was able to find cheapest. A thorough exploration in historiography, and this is from a later period. If my year works out that I have some extra time and I feel like undertaking it, well, then I might consider it. This is by Liu Zi, the 661 to 721. So that's well out of my period. My purview for this project has expanded, so I have gone into the Qin and Han dynasties. Initially, I had been thinking of staying in the Zhou dynasty, the Warring States and spring and autumn periods, but I have expanded it, which puts me coterminous pretty much with the focal point of Mark Edward Lewis's studies by and large, he is the cause of my interest in this period particularly. He's got a number of books which have been part of this project. And there is a Harvard series of Imperial China. He wrote the first 3 books for that. And so my hope is when I finish this old literature, and I have other books in the queue. So I've got these 3, which, these 3, sorry. I'm going to knock something over. I've got these 3, which are big works. Well, big enough. I mean, 250 pages is not that big. But old works, important works. But I do have at least half dozen more big, major, important literary works. Before I tackle that Harvard series, so there are 3 initial volumes by Mark Edward Lewis, followed by 3 other volumes touching upon successive dynasties. And I would like to do that because initially my idea was to just get a grasp, a long view on the history of China. That said, I started with archaeology, and then when I was reading those archaeological books, I was not really even aware when it came to the Zhou dynasty that there was such a wealth of literary material. Those books did not touch on it at all. I'm glad that I had all of the archaeology behind me. It seems like a pretty strong way to get a good grounding. But I don't think that there is any shortcut to coming to terms with early China. I think one really must tackle a good number of these books. And in some ways, something like the Analects of Confucius may be less important. As I say, Confucius is all over the place. There is hardly, I don't think there is a book which doesn't make some mention of him. Maybe just to repeat again some anecdote that you've seen everywhere else. But his imprint is all over early China. And I think I have a lot more respect for Confucius and the figure of Confucius and the Confucian legacy than ever I could have just from, say, any single work. So I will leave that off here. I am now chipping away on these University of Washington Press books, and if I indeed finish them, I will make another recent reads video. So thank you very much for stopping by my channel.